Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For anyone that's new here, my name is Rachel. For any of my regulars, welcome back. In today's video, I'm gonna answer some of the most frequently asked questions I get about working on cruise ships. Now, some of these are questions that I get on social media, like my Instagram, which, hey, go follow me on. Link is in the description. Subtle, very subtle. And some of these are things that would often pop up on the ship in guest interactions or question and answer sessions. So that's basically what this video is going to be about. As far as my background, if you've seen my channel, you know that I am in fact a traveling performer. I tend to hop around either doing regional work or working on ships. I do call New York City home, even though I am currently in Pittsburgh in my family home. So I travel a lot, and cruise ships specifically, I have worked in that field off and on for just about 10 years, with quite a large gap in the middle when I lived in Las Vegas. But I have worked for 2 different companies, and I was actually set to start working with my third right before the coronavirus kind of put a wrench in the works. But I will go back to doing that as soon as it is safe to sail again. So I have a lot of experience working for those companies, so this is based on my experience with those ships in particular. Everyone's experience is unique, and ships are definitely one of those things that you either love or you hate. There is no like, eh. So yeah, I'm gonna go through my questions. If I'm looking over here, it's because I wrote them down so I don't forget. But yeah, the first question that I get is, what is my actual position and how long are my contracts? So on both ships, I was hired as a production vocalist. So on the first cruise line, I was hired as one of 2 singers in a cast of 16. So we had 14 dancers, 1 male singer and 1 female singer. Let's just say you learn stamina real quickly when you're singing every other song for 45 minutes twice a night. And then more recently, the cruise line I was working with is 4 vocalists and 2 singer-dancers. So it's very unique depending on what cruise line you work for. I have also worked as a rehearsal swing, emergency replacement. I've also installed my own replacements, and I also worked as a vocal captain. So I've worn a lot of hats. So if you have any further questions that are more specific, absolutely reach out to me or comment below. I will make sure to check back if you guys have any questions about that. So a typical contract length is somewhere between 6 and 9 months on the ship, and typically rehearsals are between 4 and 8 weeks. So that's a general rule. It can vary drastically between cruise lines, and it also depends on, you know, is the ship going into dry dock to get updated? Is, you know, there's so many things I could go into minutia-wise for a reasoning of a certain contract length. But there is one caveat to this. There are some cruise lines that prefer to hire what they call a burrito contract, which basically means you sign on to do 3 contracts with set vacations between, and you get a bonus for completion. So that is the only instance that's drastically different. But yeah, so for me in general, my contracts have been somewhere between 6 and 9 months on board with a month to 2 months of rehearsal. So the second question I get a lot is, how do you get this job? So being in the entertainment department, which is obviously where my experience lies, there are kind of 2 ways to get hired, and that is via a live audition or by a video submission. So live auditions, every cruise line, once again, is different. I will actually post the links to some of those more major cruise lines, their casting pages, and they have auditions all over the world, typically year-round. Sometimes they'll return to the bigger cities more often, like New York or LA, London, places like that. But they always post them. The thing with live auditions is that you need to know that if you're auditioning in a major city, it will be busy. In New York City, their open call day for vocalists, they had over 300 people sign up for one day before they had to start turning people away. Now it's a little bit easier if you happen to have an agent, you might be able to get an appointment. For dancers, again, it's a gigantic cattle call. So be patient, understand that this is a job that people really, really covet, and respect the fact that if you want to try to hit 2 auditions in one day, this is not the kind of audition that you're going to be doing that with. I personally have auditioned for a couple of cruise lines, but the ones that I have worked for have all been done via video submission. So typically the way a video submission would work, at least in my case, is I submit my production show reel showing, a variety of vocal styles, showing my movement ability, because I have already established myself as a production vocalist. Then if they have more specific needs, like figuring out what ship I might be right for, they can come back to me and say, okay, here, prepare these 2 songs and this bit of choreography, send it back to us. That's typically how it works. That's how I've been hired by all 3 companies that I have been hired by. So, but it's totally individual. It's always different for other people. But one thing I do want to say about this is if you don't have formal training, you can still audition and get booked to work on a cruise line. Like, obviously, I would say the majority of people that I work with have had formal training and have gone to school specifically to be a performer, and then this is obviously performing, but you're getting to travel at the same time, which is amazing. But that is not always the case. I have worked with singers that had sort of formal training, but not really. And the only way that is challenging is you have to learn your own voice and your own body. And I find that people that have had formal training, they get through the experience a little more easily because you have that foundation to build upon. But don't be discouraged from auditioning if you don't have formal training. They can absolutely see raw talent as well. So that's what I'll say about that. Moving on, number 3. How do you rehearse? Well, this is kind of paired with another question we get a lot, which is, do you guys travel as a group? Yes and no. We're all hired individually, and then we come together and rehearse for anywhere between 4 and 8 weeks, depending on the cruise line, depending on how many shows you're learning. That kind of determines the length of rehearsal. And then from that point, you travel as a group, you do your contract, and then you all disperse and do other wonderful things. So no, we don't just like do a whole contract together and then say, okay, we're all gonna go here. In general, unless you're specifically requesting to work with another person again, you don't always see those people on another contract. It can, if you're booking around the same time, occasionally I've had overlap from other casts, but I would say that it's not as likely, especially if you work for a larger cruise line that has more ships. So typically rehearsals are done either in Miami or Florida in general. That's where a lot of the cruise lines are based out of. There are several that also rehearse in London and California as well. So it just depends on your individual cruise line. And singers, it's slightly different, again, depending on the cruise line. 2 of the 3 companies that I've worked for sent me my rehearsal materials ahead of time and expected me to be familiar with them prior to arriving. And then the other cruise line, just day 1 went, here's everything, let's go. So it just depends. One thing I do want to mention, kind of in reference to the second question about auditioning, do your research as to which companies your talent fits with, because every cruise line is looking for something slightly different. So here's an example. So Carnival, they have their playlist shows. Playlist shows means that you have singers who dance and dancers who sing. There is not a dancer track and there is not a singer track. You have to be able to do both for that particular cruise line. Whereas for, say, some of the more old school style shows, you need more of a park and bark singer. You might have someone that's a little more established as far as maybe their credits are a little bigger, they might be a little bit older, they have more experience, and you've got a whole background of dancers and you're just more of a come out and sing situation. So I highly recommend do your research as to what niche your particular skill fits into. And something else that I think people should be aware of, it has loosened up a lot in the 10 years I've worked on the cruises, but be aware that certain cruise lines do look for a certain aesthetic. So there are certain cruise lines that will be very honest about what sizes they're looking for. Now, I am by no means telling you don't go into that audition, because you have every right to show yourself in all of your wonderful glory to them, and then they can make that choice. However, be aware that if they do end up not choosing you, that it could be based on something that you have no control over. So for example, I, for years, could not audition for certain cruise lines because I was too short. I'm 5'3", and the minimum height for several of the cruise lines was 5'6". And, you know, I asked for feedback from them and they said, we loved you, but do you know how expensive and how difficult it would be to alter all of the costumes from 5 production shows when you typically wear between 6 and 10 costumes in a production show? They don't make new costumes for you. You have to fit into the costume the last person did. So absolutely go in, show every beautiful piece of yourself. But if you're aware that there's a specific aesthetic that they're looking for, just consider that that might be one to, you know, focus your energy somewhere else. But absolutely, you deserve to be in every single room and show them your best. So, sorry, taking you to church there for a minute. Yes, so after rehearsals, we have a little bit of a thing we call either install or cast change. That is when you get on board the ship as a group and you install the shows. So that is the first time you're getting lights and sound and costumes and being in that room. So that typically lasts for a cruise, sometimes a cruise and a half, and then you're up and running. So the next question I get, I guess this is number 4, is what is a normal day like? So I will say that this depends entirely on the length of your cruises and how many shows you have. But I'm gonna tell you about a show day. So on a show day, we typically will have a rehearsal in the morning just to make sure everything is working. Technically speaking, the sound, the lights, any sort of automation. We won't do it with costumes, but all the technical aspects to make sure it's fresh and in our bodies. I personally, on show days, also like to go to the gym because for me, that is the best way to make sure that my instrument, my voice, my body, everything is happy and warm. And then it takes me, I would say, between an hour and a half to fully get ready for a show, whether it be hair, makeup, presetting my costumes, checking my props, all of those things takes about an hour and a half. And then we do 2 45-minute shows and then break it all down. And after that, typically the cast will go and hang out in our own bar because we do actually have one of those ourselves. Yeah, so that's a kind of a typical day depending on how many shows you have. So if you're doing, say, a 14-day cruise like my most recent contract and you only have 5 shows, that means that you have a lot of days where you're not performing. Now, we do have other duties as far as like safety and we have all the sort of trainings that you get as an ordinary crew member because we are crew members as well as performers. So sometimes we'll have a emergency drill or a training like that, but honestly, I would say most of the time, especially as cast members, you can kind of get off the ship and be a guest. You know, you can get off and go on an excursion. You can go explore the port. A lot of people tend to go find Wi-Fi and good food, especially if you're going to the same place over and over again. But my last contract, I went to 28 countries in 7 months. So I was not about to spend my time and my money on Wi-Fi. I was going to Rome. I was in St. Petersburg. So for anyone that wants to have like a negative attitude about people that perform on ships, it's always been kind of confusing to me because you're getting to do the same job that anybody else gets to do on land, but you get to wake up in a different place every day. There's nothing else like it. That's all I can say. Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess that answers my question 5, which was how often can you get off the ship? So for me, you can get off the ship any day that is not a sea day, because obviously you can't get off the ship on the sea day. But also in general, people tended to not get off on show days. It would just depend. Okay, so number 6, sort of involved with room and board. We often got asked, where do you live? And I wanted to so often say, oh, we get helicoptered in every day. But no, we do live, typically, unless you're an officer or the cruise director, you live below deck, below the levels that the guests are on. My favorite setup personally is when the performers are actually underneath the stage or behind the stage, so we're kind of in our own little area. That's my personal favorite, but that doesn't always happen. And as a vocalist, I'm not sure if this is every single cruise line, but in my experience, you don't share a cabin. You have a single occupancy cabin as a vocalist. Dancers tend to have a roommate, or they have what some ships call a flip-flop, which means you have 2 separate rooms and then you share a bathroom. And they are small. I will tell you that they are small. But honestly, you kind of learn to adapt to the space. It's the same idea of like when you lived in college and you were in a tiny dorm room, or for any of my people that live in New York City, is it really that much smaller than your room? But yes, so that is one of the like negative things, is that you do have very small confined spaces, but you learn to adapt. And yes, we do get free room and board, so all of our food is free. We do eat the same food as all of the guests. Actually, sometimes we get better food, it just depends. We do have our own dining rooms that are separate just for crew, but as entertainers, we have what you call guest privileges. So that means we can also go up into a guest area as long as it's not too busy and eat up there as well. So yeah, the only thing I would say that you really have to kind of pay for on the ship is going to be your Wi-Fi, and I hate to admit how much I spend on Wi-Fi, which is why you so often see cruise ship members finding Wi-Fi in port, because it's not cheap and it's not great quality, but in a way it's nice because you can kind of disconnect from things. But again, that's one of those things that, depending on your personality, may be difficult. You know, if you're very much a homebody, it is more difficult to be in touch with your loved ones at home. So just something to bear in mind. Okay, moving on to number 7. What do you do when someone is injured or sick? This is something that as the vocal captain and the dance captain, you have to be concerned with. We have what we call our contingency plans. So for the dancers, if it's a solo number, there will be an understudy and a reblock. So you'll respace the stage depending on who is missing. As a vocalist, you have a couple of options. If you are just vocally sick or fatigued and you can't sing, but you're physically okay, we actually have sick tracks, which are our own voices that we record during a show so that we can lip sync to ourselves. That is, of course, something that we do only when you're so exhausted that you can't sing. Our first thing would be to, simplify a harmony or take out a riff or pick a lower option for some of your vocal lines. That's always your first choice, but sometimes we've all been there. When you lose your voice, you lose your voice. So we never want to compromise the quality of a show because, we're human. So that would be the first level of defense, I will say, as a vocalist. Then at that point, if you are physically blocked out, if you are injured and you cannot be on the stage, typically we will then have a different singer sing that track. So for example, twice on my last contract, we had the other lead female vocalist was out. And that meant that I picked up 4 extra songs in the show, and our singer-dancer picked up 2 extra songs. So we just kind of, it's a giant puzzle piece. You figure out, okay, well, I sang that number, I don't have time to change, so this person can take this number and this person can take this number. So that's kind of how we do it, and most of the time, guests really don't know the difference because that's what our job is. Our job is to get up on that stage and do it as if it was our normal, ordinary show, okay? And, okay, I've got one more that I get asked all the time, and I have no good answer for you. Where is your favorite place that you have been? Let me tell you, I have thought long and hard about this. I can give you my current favorite, but it really depends on what kind of places you like. Like if you're a beach person, you're gonna love the Caribbean, you're gonna love the Mediterranean. If you are like me and you prefer, you know, history and cooler weather, I loved doing Europe last year. And if I'm honest, my 2 favorites at the moment are actually Iceland and Norway. If you can go to either of those places, do it. But if you don't like cold weather, you're not gonna enjoy it. So it just depends. I think my country count right now is, I'll have to look. I'll post it on here. I can't remember how many countries I've been to. I'm very, very blessed to have had the experiences that I've had on ships. But if you guys have any other questions that you'd like to have me answer, I would be more than happy to do another one of these. I think I may do, you know, maybe an audition series to talk about like maybe what you should be singing, what you shouldn't be singing when you're going in for this, because cruise ships are a very specific style. So once again, if you want to do this job, do your research. And you know what, I am more than happy to be a source of information for you if that's something you're interested in. But yeah, that is my main Q&A of life as a performer on a ship. If you have any other questions, comment below. I will make sure to answer them. And I will see you guys at the next one. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and go follow me on Instagram if you want to see me posting every day. See you guys.